This is a Warmlite 5-person tent, and we're going to be showing you how we set it up and some specs about this tent. This 5-person tent is really good for base camp and people, or just people in general who are going to be spending a lot of time inside of a tent. And so it's typically used for like base camp at Everest or something like that, or if you're going to be doing field work or something along those lines where you're just going to be spending a bunch of time inside of a tent and you want a lot of space, or you have a large group of people, you know, you have a family or 5 friends or something like that, and you don't want to carry 5 separate tents and everyone be, you know, carrying their own gear and then having to set up 5 tents every night. Why bother with that? So you can always just carry one, you know, one person has to get stuck carrying the tent, but you can offload and have someone else carry something else. So there's multiple uses for our Warmlite 5-person tent, but the most common is base camp, but also for large groups. This is a regular sized door. So on this particular 5-person, we made both of them, both sides, both ends have a regular door, but you can have a large door installed. And here I'm going to show you the windows. And so you just would unzip the front and the back, and then so that would open up the outside, and then you would have these little loops on the fabric part. And from there, you can hook out your rucksacks, which do come with the tent, and you can fill it with whatever heavy material happens to be lying around to hold out this flap so that it doesn't blow around and, you know, create a bunch of noise and try and, you know, blow the tent apart kind of deal. So you would hook your rucksacks to these little tie-outs, and that would just be the outside part. There is a secondary inside door that you also have to open up in order to fully open these windows, but this is just the outside part.
Okay.
All right, so this is the inside of the 5-person Warmlite tent, and so yeah, we'll just hop inside here, and as you can see, here's the inside window part that I was talking about, where you have to open up this inner little door in order for it to actually, you know, be fully opened, the windows, so that you can have that airflow. This is a Warmlite 3R tent, so just your standard 3-person Warmlite tent. So again, this is rated for up to 3 people, or, you know, if you just need a lot of extra space, but you don't need something quite as big as a Warmlite 5-person. Both the Warmlite 3-person and the 5-person tent, they really only require 4 tent stakes. Now you can fit up to 8 on this tent because we have one for each corner of the tent where the tent poles come down to, but that's only for extreme wind conditions, or like it's really windy and you don't want the tent to blow away, or you're in maybe snowy conditions and it's not, you know, staked in as well. You're kind of concerned that it could melt or conditions could change. But for the most part, you really only need the 4 tent stakes in order to hold the 3 and the 5-person tents in the ground. So this is the large door that I was talking about. This example is on the Warmlite 3-person tent, but as you can see, it is much larger. You have this whole entire opening on both sides of the door versus what you saw on the previous tent, or on the back side of this 3R is a regular door, so it only opens down one side, and so that is your big difference. There's a couple ounce weight difference, so depending on how much weight you're trying to save will depend on if you have the large door added onto your tent. If you're making it custom, all of our standard 3-person tents will come with 1 large door and 1 regular door. This is a Warmlite 3-person climbers tent, so 3CR, so it's a regular, you know, in that it's still got double insulation in the body of the tent, but it's a climbers, so that makes it 2 feet shorter in the middle, which is really important for climbers and mountaineers and people who are in really extreme conditions where you will generally need a smaller footprint, and so that's where the climbers tent comes in. So again, this is still 3-person, rated for 3 people, but it's just a little bit shorter in the middle for those when you are going to be going in places where you're really going to be conscientious of the size of your tent, and so you need that smaller footprint. All right, so now you can see we're going to compare the 3-person climbers with the 3-person standard so that you can see that 2-foot distance, you know, shorter in the middle, and you can really compare. It's not any shorter in height or in any other form of, size of the tent. It's just those 2 feet in the middle. And so here's just a really good example of the size difference between the 3-person standard and the 3-person climber. And this particular climber's tent came without windows. Typically, all of our stock tents will come with windows on all size tents, but this one just doesn't have windows because sometimes, people don't necessarily want one. So when you're custom making it, you can, order them without windows, or you can order them with one window. That part doesn't matter. That's super customizable. But this particular one did come without windows, and so that's always an option as well. So this is a Warmlite 2-person climber's tent. So again, same concept as a 2-person tent, but it's got that 2-foot shorter distance in the middle of the tent. And this one is also done in the new color styles that we have come up with. So all the other tents that you've seen up to this point have been using the original style of color design. What we also call it kind of the retro, because it's been around for so long. And that's where there's the front end cone and the rear end cone are one color, and the body is a separate color. And on this one, we're calling it Style 23 because we just came up with it. And it's where that color is going to be coming from all the way from the rear end cone all the way up through the body and down the door, and that will all be one color, and then only the front end cone part outside of the door will be a separate color. And so this is a good example also, so that you can see the Style 23, the new one. So when you're making your tent, this could be another color, design choice that you can choose from. Or if you're shopping on the website and you're trying to decide between 2 different tents that have the same colors, just 2 different styles of the way that the colors are done, we can still have blue top, yellow ends for the most part, but it might still have that blue door and the blue end cone on one side. So this is just something fun that we're, having different options available. And also, again, when it's, when you're making your own tent, it's fully customizable, you can choose different colors and design styles that you're looking for, because it's entirely, we hand cut every single piece. So every climber's tent comes stock with wind stabilizers, and they are built into the front end cone, like right where the front end cone and the body meet, and they will attach to these little clips on the opposite corner from each other, and that what will give them the ability to withstand the 160-mile-an-hour winds. The standard Warmlite tent can withstand winds up to 90 to 95 miles per hour, but when you're when you're climbing, you're mountaineering, you're in the mountains and more extreme conditions, and so because of that, you will most likely end up needing that extra strength that is provided by the wind stabilizers. You can't really climb around these when they're in place. So what you would do is you would set them up before you go to bed at night. So get into your tent, get settled, all that stuff, then put the wind stabilizers into place. Or, and then when you're leaving in the morning, take them out, get out of the tent. And then before you leave, if you're in and out throughout the day, that's fine. But as soon as you leave to go do something else throughout the day, if your tent is staying in place, then re-engage those wind stabilizers if you're expecting, windy conditions. So this is a 2-person's standard 2R Warmlite tent, but we made this one up to have all of the extra bells and whistles that could possibly exist or be added onto a Warmlite tent. So now a standard Warmlite tent will have a double layer of fabric or insulation on just the body, but not on either cone. There's only one layer of fabric on both ends of the cones. However, in this tent, it has end liners, which is a secondary layer. That same secondary layer that exists on the body, it's also on both of the cones. And this is for when you're going to extreme cold and you really need that extra layer to create extra warmth. And so that's what the second door is that you're seeing here, is that to get you into the tent through the end liner as well. And so again, in this tent, we added the wind stabilizers, but because there's also the addition of the end liners, those wind stabilizers, they have to be able to go through the end liner. And so there's this extra zipper here, and you will open that up to allow the wind stabilizer through. and then you can attach it on, the opposite corner of the tent. But again, if you're in a situation where it's not as windy or whatnot, and so you really don't need those wind stabilizers, you can just push them through the end liner and zip it closed, and it's kind of out of the way because there's the extra string and all that, and it can be in the way. So you can just put it behind there and it won't be in the way. Here is the rear end liner as well. It doesn't really look like much, but there is an end liner back here as well. This is the upper vent, and this exists on every tent, not just this tent. And this is so that you can close up when it's really windy or the conditions are very cold or there's lots of rain or snow. Somehow the elements are, getting inside of your tent through the ventilation systems. Because there is 3 vents built into this tent, and they're specifically designed in order to create the optimal airflow to prevent condensation. Because when you're inside of a tent and you close everything up and you're breathing, all of that water vapor in your breath will then condensate onto the tent walls. Well, by putting in these very specific placed ventilation points, it prevents the condensation building up on your tent walls. So we only suggest ever closing any of these vents if the weather is extremely inclement and you just absolutely have to batten down the hatches. That's why we build these systems into it. There is this little closing bit at the back of the tent. You can fold down the front of the door in order to close the tiny vent at the bottom front of the tent. And there's also the zipper piece at the top as well. So all 3 of those pieces are specifically built for ventilation, but you can close them down if you really need to due to the weather. So this is a brand new little addition that we've just created, and it's to make it more efficient to close down that front vent, that front bottom vent for the door. And it is just a built-in zipper system that you can close up, and it will make the weather completely incapable of getting through this waterproof barrier. And this is brand new addition. It won't exist on all tents. It would be something that you'd have to add afterwards, but it is something that's available. And so now we're just going to kind of show you all of these tents compared, so you can see, one for the next, exactly how big these tents are next to each other. I'm 5'8", so that gives you a rough reference of about how tall I am and how tall these tents are on me. And so we're going to start with the 5-person tent, and then we'll move into the 3-person tent, the 3R standard tent, and then we have a 3-person climbers tent, and then we have our 2-person 2R, it's just standard 2-person tent, and then the 2-person climbers tent. And then here you can see we're standing here right in front of the 2-person climbers tent, looking back down, and you can see all of the different size tents, just, kind of in comparison to each other. They do get shorter as time goes, as they get smaller, both in height and in length.